In this going up into Easter in this Lent season, we're spending some time looking at Old Testament passages that most people would tell you in some way look ahead to Jesus Christ. And today we're looking at a story that absolutely fascinates me. It is the story of Abraham. My daughter even called last night. We got on an extended discussion about this passage. There's so much there. I want to look at this passage maybe a little differently. Not from our perspective, but like we were there at the time from the perspective of Abraham. I'm in Genesis chapter 12. And this is a story that you are well aware of. Starting with verse 1, going through verse 5. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went, as the Lord told him. And Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took his wife Sarah and his brother's son Lot, and all the possessions that they had gathered, and the persons whom they had acquired in Haran, and they set forth to go to the land of Canaan. Now, I'm going to fill in some gaps here this morning. And why Abram? This seems such an odd story to me. The voice said, "Abram, go," and Abram went. Now, earlier in 11, we find out that Abram is from Ur. First of all, who would want to be from a hometown named Ur? Now, I've heard there are people who grew up around Youngstown, Ohio, or Gary, Indiana, and they say, "Where are you from?" And they go, "Youngstown, Ur." Or Gary, Ur. But it's not quite the same thing. This is the name of the town. And it looked something like this. Now, you have some heritage from Ur that I bet you didn't even know about. Why is Ur important? Do you know that the alphabet, the first written alphabet in human history, came from Ur? The wheel, if you like your new car, the wheel was invented in Ur. Which makes me wonder, why did the wheel have to be invented? That seems to be obvious to me, but the wheel was invented in Ur. It was really one of the first places of civilization. It is the place where they really started farming on a massive scale and growing and developing wheat and other grains. They were right on the Euphrates River. They learned to divert it and irrigate it. And so a lot of the stuff, if you like your bread bowl at Panera Bread, be thankful for Ur. Ur was the wealthiest, and it was the earliest civilization and the most powerful kingdom on earth. Now, when we're talking time frame here, we're talking somewhere around maybe 2,000 years before Christ. So if we think back, wow, Jesus, that's ancient history, 2,000 years ago, we are as close to the life of Jesus as Abraham was. 2,000 years. We have this story. At some point, Terah, Abram's father, leaves Ur for Haran. But it doesn't say why. And it seems to me that's a big part of the story. So I thought I would fill that in a little bit. Now, there are a lot of ancient Jewish stories that aren't in our Bible, but the Jews would have circulated them, and it became kind of part of their knowledge. So I was refreshing myself this week. So it seems to be, if you go back, Terah, which was Abram's father, the tradition has that he made his living making idols out of stone. And he did it quite well and became actually a little bit of a wealthy man. Abram had a brother who, oddly enough, was also named Haran. And here's where the story gets interesting. Haran was kind of managing the idol store, I don't know what they called it, one day, and Haran had to leave town for a couple days for business. So he left his younger brother Abram in charge. Abram was not really part of the idol store business. There's a story that a 50-year-old person came in and wanted to buy an idol, and Abram, now in charge of the store, looked at the 50-year-old man and said, "How old are you?" And the man said, "I'm 50." And Abram said, "If you're 50, why would you spend your money on an idol that's 1 day old?" And the man turned around and stomped out of the store. Later on, a woman came in and said something to the order, "I would like an idol to bless our wheat harvest." And Abram said, "How much wheat do you think your idol could ever eat or consume or farm itself?" And she said nothing. And he said, "Then why on earth would you ever want to buy an idol?" And the woman turned around and she left the store. And when Haran came back, he got word that these two people left the store, didn't buy an idol, because Abram, who he left in charge of the store, had told them it's not a good idea. So Haran and Abram got into an argument. Trust me, this is all there in the story. And Abram was challenging Haran and said, "Your God is powerless. These little stone gods are nothing. They're nothing." And his brother said to Abram, "Do you think that your God could save you from the fire?" And Abram said, "Absolutely." So I don't know how many or how willing he was. They just grabbed Abram and threw him into the fiery furnace. Does that sound familiar? And nothing happened. And Abram walked out. And his brother Haran, who the text listed as having died, said, "Well, I'll show him. My idols are powerful." And he threw himself into the fire and immediately perished. That's why Haran is no longer around. Now the townspeople, having heard of this, and this was witnessed, they got so upset that they thought, "Wait a minute, we have to show people how powerful our gods are." So they got together in a town council and said, "We need to build a tower up into the heavens." You might have heard of it, the Tower of Babel. "And we'll put our idol up on the top with a sword. And then if anybody wants to talk to any god, they have to come to our tower and ascend our tower and talk to the gods." Abram and his family now are persona non grata, and that's why they start the journey. And they make it up to this town called Haran, oddly enough, the same name as Abraham's brother. And I don't know if it was because they were tired, or maybe they found it and they liked it, or maybe Abram's father said, "Wait a minute, this reminds me of my son that's no longer here." And they just kind of stayed around for a while. So they leave, they're not welcome. Whatever happened, this family was now on the outside looking in, and because they were on the outside looking in of this very powerful kingdom, they felt the need to leave. They weren't comfortable anymore with what's going on. Let me ask a question. And one good thing is, I think hopefully we're a little less comfortable now than we were a month ago or a year ago, but hopefully we're increasingly uncomfortable. Let me ask a question. Are we really that comfortable with the world that we look and see out there? Are we comfortable with the way they do business? Are we comfortable with the things they think are important? Are we comfortable with how it's run? Are we comfortable with how people exercise power? Are we comfortable with anything? We shouldn't feel that comfortable. You know, just in a rapid time, and maybe it's because I'm now getting old enough where I can, I've said this before, start to yell at squirrels in my yard. It's okay, my wife yells at birds. The ones that eat all her seed, but not the ones she wants to look at. And in just a rapid 3-4 years' time, we've been so willing to just give up on a lot of things that we used to just take for granted because we've pursued, and we've pursued the idol of wealth, we've pursued the idol of comfort, we've pursued the idol of safety. Because we get very comfortable with some things that we see all the time, and we start to hold them up as important. Our love, our devotion, our fidelity should not flow to some of the things that I think we typically see. We should look for something better, something more meaningful. And in the middle of this disaffection, they're not in their hometown. They've had to leave Ur. They're up at this place called Haran. If you follow a map, Ur is down a little south of modern-day Baghdad. Just go up the Euphrates River until you get into Turkey, and there's a certain point where you can then turn straight west, and if you find the map that says Aleppo, Syria, go straight west till you hit Aleppo, and then that's when they would have turned south. But we have this interesting, God meets Abram and says, go to a land I will show you. My mind is filled with questions. The first one is, who's talking to Abram? This is not like, we don't have Jewish history. No one's going to the temple. No one's identified. We don't have Yahweh yet. We don't have Elohim. We just have this idols, and Abram is somehow disaffected and doesn't like anything. And all of a sudden, the story says, and the Lord said to Abram, well, who is the Lord? I mean, when I was a kid, I'd been to church. And so when I heard a still small voice, well, I was told by my grandfather, my grandmother, and my people in the family in church, oh, that must be God talking to me. Well, there was none of that with Abram. And yet Abram still responded. And that very simple phrase, and he left. If Abram was a wealthy man in Ur, as it appears that they were, he probably possessed many things of the best craftsmanship available. He would have lived in a fine home, a mansion in Ur, that would probably still look fairly impressive today. As an upper-class free man, he would have attained a level of high education, whatever that would have meant. He would have been literate. He would have been fluent in Sumerian, Akkadian, and probably a few other Semitic languages. And he might have even known Egyptian a little bit, enough to do trade. He would have enjoyed a refined urban life in the most highly advanced center of civilization that existed at the time. To leave all of that to go to Canaan or go to a place I will show you would have meant a sacrifice of material comfort. Instead of a home in the Chaldean kingdom, instead of a mansion in Ur, he became a dweller in a tent. This was not an easy transition. But he heard the voice that says, go to a land I'll show you, and it's very simple. He went. He had this promise of, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless all nations. Every family on earth will be blessed through you. Whoever blesses you, I will bless. Whoever curses you, I will curse. Boy, that's a pretty good promise. But I wonder what Abram heard. I imagine Abram left Ur. Imagine he started on his journey and went, remember Ur? Remember where we used to live? That was pretty impressive. But God just told me, I'm going to make you into a great nation. And I'm just telling you, I bet Abram thought in terms of walls and temples and houses and power and military and all the things. They kick me out, I'm going to show them. They're going to rue the day that they got rid of me. Eventually, the whole earth will be blessed through me, which means I'm going to be bigger than Ur. And I'm going to be greater. Eventually, I will have more. I will do more. I'll be more well-known. I'll be more visible. And everybody on earth is going to know who I am. He was drawn to this promise of being blessed. So when God shows up, I think we have an idea how this might have looked. I don't even know what kind of idea that Abram had of a God But whatever this voice, this new thing that he was talking to was different than an idol, because for the first time, this God talked. God was involved. This God cared. This God immerses himself in the lives of his people, not just a little stone thing I put up on a mantle. And with the promise of blessing, he was eager to follow. I think often we live in a world where we're promised that we're going to be blessed when we follow Christ, and that is a pull that draws us. Now, let me just say a couple things. I like the idea of being blessed. And I do think there are natural blessings, natural good things that accrue to us from following Christ. Habits change, outlook changes in a way that's beneficial. There are people here I have heard on the grapevine who, when they see a little circle with a V and W in it, lose their minds. I have heard there's other people, when they drive down the road and they see an Indian head with a cursive Indian underneath it, pull off the road. I know people who are just overwhelmed by the sight of a cobalt blue glassware. Other people see depression glass of a certain color and they have to have it. Other people, strange, when they see an old baseball card like a 1952 Ted Williams, are immediately drawn to just a piece of cardboard. I like the idea of being blessed. And I do think there's natural benefits when one follows Christ. And I do really believe that God blesses his people. That is absolutely true. And I will say this, at this stage of my life, we have tried to be faithful. And I think God has taken care of us. I'm going back. I lived in this, if you were in Marshall, Texas, our house was behind the church. You had to look kind of behind the church. Next to the church was a very big house. A guy named L.A. Wheeler lived in that house. If you live in East Texas, people don't have names. They have initials. T.J. and L.A. and A.J. and I don't know what it is, but that's just kind of how it is. L.A. Wheeler lived next to us. And there was someone had come to church, and I forget what it was, and I said to my wife, I said, I think we need to give $200 for this. And it's not like we had a lot of money to give, but that money was this $200 was in my head. And so we did. We wrote this check for $200 on Sunday. Tuesday, L.A. Wheeler called me from next door. He says, Doug, can you do me a favor? L.A. was getting up in years. He said, my brother has an appointment with the cardiologist at Baylor Medical Center in Dallas. Could you drive him there? I get nervous in traffic. I said, sure. And he goes, don't worry, I'll pay for gas. So I grabbed his brother and I drove him to L.A. I drove him to Baylor Medical Center in Dallas for his cardiologist appointment and back. And he gave me whatever, I don't know, different administration, $40 for gas. Now it would be $528 for gas, but $40 for gas. And then he goes, by the way, I do appreciate it. Don't say no or I'll get angry. Here's $200. I do think God blesses his people. And God takes care of us. We need to get used to saying yes when we hear God's voice. Here's what I also think. I also think that when God promises blessings, that our problem is we substitute what we think blessing is with what God thinks blessing is. If I just say yes to God, I'll have 25 more 1952 Topps baseball cards. I don't think it works that way. Whatever thing we like, I don't think we automatically just get more of. I think, in fact, I know, I have a better marriage than my father did. have a better relationship with my kids than my father had with his. There's a bunch of things in my life that is quantitatively, qualitatively better and has nothing to do with stuff or wealth. The danger to us might be the exact same thing as it was to Abraham. We can very quickly decide we'll follow because we get more things. I'm going to follow because I'm going to be bigger than Ur. In fact, we think that's kind of what's going on. If you follow Abraham after this, it's not just this unbroken journey. He makes some missteps. Doesn't quite go right. He goes to Egypt, probably because that's the biggest rival power to where he just came from. After a while, he goes, God, you promised some things. I'm going to get this going here. Look at Ishmael. Thank you, we can start now. Whatever you had in mind, I have my son. We can start this. What do you have next? And God says, hold on, that's not what I had in mind. Your wife is going to bear a son. Sarah overheard the conversation, started laughing. God said, oh, I heard you laugh. Not only will you have a son, when he's born, I'm going to call him, you laughed. That will be his name. You laughed, Isaac. Here's what I want us to think about. What if the blessings look different than we commonly think they do? Abram thought the blessings meant wealth. Through you, I'm going to bless all nations. Oh, I'm going to become powerful. I'm going to become this kingdom to rival who just kicked me out. And no, this was through you, I'm going to bless all nations. Through your family, Jesus. That's the blessing I'm talking about. So what if blessings does look different? I like this proverb. The company of just and righteous men is better than wealth and a rich estate. What if blessings look different? See, we equate our idea of blessings with God's idea, but I think God's idea is different. Therefore, God will give me all the things that culture values. And you can turn on the Christian TV channel tonight, and you'll find three guys that say, if you just have faith, God will give you more money or your car that you like or whatever the thing. If I want a Tesla Model S, I'm going to claim it. Now, is there an element of truth that people who really believe something's going to happen, it's more likely to than people who don't believe it's going to happen? Yes. But the reason why there's millions of people starving to death in the Sudan is not because they don't imagine cheeseburgers. What if this assumption is not true, that God doesn't pay back in our idea of blessings? See, Abram had to choose, and the choice was, is it going to be your culture or is it going to be mine? Is it going to be your way or is it going to be mine? Are you going to want your blessings or are you going to want mine? There is much that hangs in the balance here. If we follow because we think we will be blessed with stuff, we leave ourselves open to a certain amount of disappointment. And if we think that we will be blessed with money, stuff, things, possessions, all the things people chase after, here's the biggest danger. Even as we say we're following Christ, we've never, ever, ever left the world. Our love, our fidelity, our faithfulness, our desires are still stuck here. The problem with these things is they are all temporary. We should know that now. 4 weeks ago, there were people living in Ukraine who were going to the cafes every day, enjoying their morning coffee, going to have a job. Look how quickly it can be overturned. There are probably people here that have been saving for 4 years and had their family vacation out to Yellowstone all planned out, and all of a sudden, they weren't budgeting $5 a gallon. These things only erode, they can erode quickly. Do I pursue the blessings of my culture? And here's the thing, my culture has a lot of blessings. We have more avenues to more things and more stuff than anybody in history. But I think we find those things don't last. I think that's why we find people who they live this desperate life. They're looking for meaning. They're not finding it with the Tesla Model S or the 1952 Ted Williams or with whatever else. So what are God's blessings? I thought about this a little bit. I know there's going to be a guy on TV later tonight that's going to tell you money and stuff and things. I got a couple. Clean hands and a pure heart. It's hard to put a price tag on a clear and clean conscience. How about this? A certain detachment from the cares of this world. A guy named John Wesley identified that. If I don't have all my weight and trust and hope in the shiny thing, then if I never get the shiny thing, it's not going to upset my apple cart. How about an authentic connection with God and others? One of the blessings of God is having the privilege to be part of this grand restoration project that we're involved in the world around us. What are some of God's blessings? How about this? This is an old word. This is old concept, old hymns here. Are you ready? This is an old term we haven't heard probably from in a while. How about a deep, settled peace? Instead of trying to push from high point to high point to high point, happy, happy time. The last thing, what are God's blessings? The number one blessing is this: an authentic connection with Jesus Christ. And the blessings, when they said to Abraham, through you I'm going to bless every nation, the one thing they were talking about in Genesis 12 was through your line, your lineage, I'm going to bring the world this possibility of a deep, authentic connection to Jesus Christ. This is a tough thing. One of the things that I have to battle, I think we all have to battle. We live in this world where there's nice stuff. There is nice stuff. But when we start to depend on it, there's a lot of things that can happen. Not only do we put ourselves in this temporary world, but we slowly distance ourselves from God's voice. Because our love is not there. Our love is to this thing. Our love is to this stuff out there. It's so readily available. But it doesn't last. So even in Genesis 12, 2,000 years before, through you I'm going to bless all nations. That thing that God was talking about to Abram was Jesus. The thing that God still talks to the world about today is Jesus.